Okay, so we'll start class. We're in the book, we're in class 25 in the book, Touching a City's Soul. So if people had a chance to get it, you got it. Okay, yeah, because it was a little bit of a break for Yantiv now. So we're on page 134 in the book, which if you actually turn back a page to 133, it tells you when this was said, right? This is from the previous Rebbe's visit to Chicago, 1942. And this is on the 11th of Shvat. This Simcha was said on the 11th of Shvat. And you'll see it's addressed to the students of the Talmud Torah, the teachers of the Talmud Torah, and the governing body of the Talmud Torah, of the Anshe Lubavitch synagogue. Now, I will tell you that the previous Rebbe is going to be speaking very, it's going to be like a lot of beautiful ideas that he's talking about what children are and the education of children. As we know, the previous Rebbe had a lot of Mesiras Nefesh, he had a lot of self-sacrifice for education. Like that's really what he risked his life for in Russia, was Jewish education, because he said if there's no young kid goats, there's no adult goats, you know, which has borne out to be the case, right? We see that, you know, if children are not educated in Torah mitzvahs and they're young, then chances of them keeping the generations going with Torah mitzvahs is greatly reduced. So he had a lot of self-sacrifice for education in Russia, and then when he came to America, in America as well, and obviously in different ways, right? You know, there were different ways to approach it based on, you know, Stalinist Russia, communist Russia versus the open nature of America was two different like approaches, but it still required Mesiras Nefesh in both ways. He's going to be talking about that to the children and to the teachers, and he's also going to be rather strong with the board about, you know, how could they approve anything less than a Torah true education in a Talmud Torah. So he's not going to hold back any, or it certainly seems like he's not holding back any of his opinions. Okay, so addressing this, so first he addresses the students of the Talmud Torah. So these are to the children, right? Since you attend the Torah True Kosher Talmud Torah schools and are taught by fine and observant male and female teachers, you should realize how important you are to your parents, your families, and to the entire Jewish people. You know, we see this is certainly the approach of Chabad, right? I mean, the emphasis, you know, I think in most secular communities for sure, it's like children are on their way to becoming adults and they're sort of tolerated until they become an adult when they can quote unquote become a contributing member of society. You know, in Yiddishkeit, the children are celebrated as the future of the Jewish people. And the Rebbe is telling the children themselves how precious and how important they are to your parents, to your families, and to the entire Jewish people. There'd be no Jewish people without the children. You, being children, were chosen by God to be his guarantors for the contract that he made with our forefathers, with all of us before the giving of the Torah. At that time, he demanded that the Jewish people that they give him guarantors who would ensure that the Jews over the ages would study Torah and fulfill its commandments as to what one should do and what one should not do. So there's a medrash that talks about how Hashem said to the Jewish people, why should I give you my most precious gift, the Torah? How will you guarantee me that you're going to be treating it respectfully? What does treating Torah respectfully means? Learning it, doing what it says, right? So the discussion between the Jews and Hashem went, well, our forefathers will be our guarantor, naming all different tzaddikim, right? Throughout Hashem, no, and finally they said, B'neinu arevim ba'deinu, our children will be our guarantors, and then Hashem said, okay. Meaning if we will teach it to our children, and by teaching it to our children and training them and doing mitzvahs, they will guarantee Torah, right? Because then that means Torah goes to another generation. And by them teaching it to their children and so on and so on. So it was in the merit of the children that we were given the Torah, which is also the Rebbe speaks a lot about the idea that at the giving of the Torah, also Rashi says, Rashi's main commentary in Chumash explains that the wording of the giving of the Torah teaches us that the women were given the Torah before the men, because the women are the main ones who have the influence in the home and on the children. And if the women accept the Torah, then they'll be able to teach the children, and then this will continue. And if the women don't accept the Torah, then it's not going to have a continuation. As we can see many times in a family, right? Sometimes in a family, it's the man who gets inspired to do Torah mitzvahs first before the rest of the family, or sometimes not even the rest of his family, versus when a woman is inspired to keep Torah mitzvahs, even if the man is not sort of coming along for the ride yet. The household is very different. You know, it's much easier to create an environment of Torah mitzvahs when it's the woman who's the one who, because right, she can make sure it's a kosher kitchen. You know, not that a man can't make sure, but it's just not usually the case that he's able to follow through with it in a practical way. You know, he really needs his wife on board and doing these things. I mean, she can really sabotage in a very strong way, whereas when the woman does it, she has a way of doing it. First of all, she's usually the one who's more involved in the running of the home and in the raising of the children and setting the tone in that way. And also she has a softer way of being able to like set that tone in a more appealing way sometimes. So even the Torah, when Hashem gave us a Torah, I told Moshe to speak to the women first. And if they accept it, then it'll be a kiyum. There'll be a continuation, and the children were the guarantors. So it's sort of like a set, you know. The Jews suggested various guarantors, but God did not accept them until the Jews said that their little children would be their guarantors, that the Torah would be studied and observed throughout the generation. You therefore have good cause to be proud of the trust that God has placed in you. Right? Look how they were speaking to children. This is like leader of a generation speaking to children like this. Study energetically, conduct yourselves properly, obey your male and female teachers, show deep respect for pious folk and for Torah scholars, and honor your parents. Those are his directives to the children. They follow these simple instructions. There's a continuation of the Jewish people, right? May God strengthen your heart so that you will want to learn and be able to learn, right? Those are two important things. The person should, if a person wants to learn, it makes it much easier. And if they're able to learn, it makes it more enjoyable, right? If they're not understanding something, it's much harder. Observe the mitzvahs carefully. And may your parents bring you up to the study of Torah, to the wedding canopy, and to the performance of good deeds. It's such a warm, beautiful, I was just struck, right? Like if you reread this, like it's just such a warm, beautiful bracha, like a grandfather speaking to his grandchildren, really. Such a warm message. It's gonna be a little different when he's speaking to the governing body, I'm just saying. But the children, it's like such a warm message of like, you are the future of the Jewish people. On you, everything depends, and you should feel good about that. Like, you should not, he didn't say, oh, you should feel responsible, it's a heavy burden, right? He was like, Hashem trusts you. Doesn't that feel wonderful? Like you're trustworthy. It's like amazing thing, you know, it's like a beautiful thing. Okay, any comments, questions before we go on to the next section?
I just think it's nice that we'll see the difference of how he speaks to children versus the board.
Oh, you will, don't worry. It will be very obvious. Okay, so now he addresses the teachers of the Talmud Torah. As teachers, you need to keep constantly in mind what treasures have been entrusted to your hands. Isn't that beautiful? Imagine every teacher views the children under their charge as treasures that have been entrusted to their hands. Material treasures, gold, gems, intricate jewelry are all worthless next to the priceless God-given gifts of treasure that the parents of these children have entrusted to your hands. Every child, regardless of gender or ancestry, is the supreme treasure, not only of his parents and family, but of the entire house of Israel. Isn't that beautiful? It's like, it's just so incredibly beautifully, regardless of gender or ancestry, right? Doesn't matter. These children are God's most precious treasures, so you are being entrusted with these treasures. In a prophecy to Yeshayahu, God describes his people as a fruit-bearing orchard. What an exquisite name, and no one but God himself could characterize his people so precisely. Now he's going to explain what that means. An orchard comprises various trees of diverse heights, branches, leaves, and fruit, right? It's not all the same. The fruits, in turn, are diverse with regard to their appearance, fragrance, taste, and even their peel. Right? Like you could imagine, peel is the outer covering, right? So like people come in different shapes and sizes and personalities and everything else, but it's all part of the orchard. It's all fruit from the orchard. Now, anyone with experience in botany knows how much toil is needed to plant a fruit orchard and how much care must be taken to ensure that every sapling takes root and grows straight. Right? You have to dig the roots, you have to irrigate the land, you have to put a stick next to the sapling and tie it there, so you know that it's irrigated at the right intervals, that means enough water, and that it's protected from vermin and harmful winds, right? There needs to be the worms that could eat away at it, or the bugs that could get to it, or winds that could blow it down. Like there's lots of stuff to do to make sure that this tree grows properly and produces fruit. The orchardist, or I guess that's how you pronounce it, works hard for long years until he lives to see that his tender sapling has grown into a strong and healthy tree that yields its species of fine fruit. It is only then that he can enjoy the gratification of seeing that his labors over the years were crowned with an eventual harvest. It takes a long time and a lot of work. Jews are God's orchard, and you, as teachers, are its gardener. Isn't that beautiful? Your task is to clear the orchard of faithless stones and filth, to work hard as you plant the tender saplings, and to focus all your skill and understanding and strength on ensuring that they take root properly. So your ruchnistika orchard tenders. You must fasten the weak little saplings firmly in place so that they will not be warped by harmful winds. You must vigilantly protect them from godless vermin and blasphemous pests. And that's what a teacher's job is. That is what a teacher's job is. A teacher's job needs to focus the skill and understanding, making sure they take root. You have to fasten them so they'll stay in place and the winds won't blow them, right? The winds of gullus won't blow them over. And you want to make sure that the vermin and all the bugs and everything don't get at them first. You want them to grow into healthy trees that produce fruit. As teachers, your gardening responsibilities demand understanding and strength and a certain degree of self-sacrificing dedication. In return, the greatest moral and spiritual gratification will be yours when you see that your frail little plants have grown into big, sturdy, thickly branched trees that yield delicious fruit and beautify God's own orchard. The fate of your pupil also seals the fate of their parents and the fate of all Jews. So now it's beautiful. This is beautiful, inspiring. This is what you have to do. This is your job. And now it's like, how important is this job? You know, like if this orchard doesn't take, so maybe they'll buy another orchard, they'll build up another orchard. This tree doesn't take, right? But that's not the case when you're talking about these Jewish children, right? It's like every child, it's the fate of their parents and the fate of all Jews. This little child, this one little child. It's not trees. We want every tree to succeed too, but if it doesn't succeed, there's always another tree in the orchard. You'll get enough fruit out of the orchard, right? But if this every single one of these children have to succeed, because the fate of their parents and the fate of all Jews is tied to every single other Jew. All that is in your hands, the hands of their teachers, and hence your weighty responsibility for the fate of Jews at large. Nothing like a little pressure. Look how different it is than to how teachers are treated in the secular world, or thought of in the secular. I don't know if they're even in the Jewish world, they need to be treated better, but I'm saying like how they're thought of, right? This is what the previous, but this is his opinion of teachers, right? This is like a very lofty, important responsibility. In your hands lies the religious, moral, and spiritual life or death of them all. When teachers provide kosher education, the Talmud Torah schools in which the pupils are guided in the path of the Torah mitzvos are holy and precious. When teachers are desecrators of Shabbos and provide a treif education, those Talmud Torah schools are nests of apostasy, and their principles are impure blot on the Jewish people. In contrast, the principals and teachers of the kosher educational institutions are the pride of the Jewish people. May you all be blessed. So a little saying how important it is, an inspiration, and a little making sure they understand what their responsibilities are. Because remember, he's talking to people, this is the times in the 1940s in America. As I should really ask permission from the woman who sent me in the beginning of the class, a woman from the class sent me an email describing how exactly what the previous Rebbe predicted could happen happened in her family. You don't hear me? Okay. Like the whole progression of the generations based on, it was exactly what he predicted would happen. So he's talking to people he wants to make sure it doesn't happen, right? He's talking to people, new immigrants, and he wants to make sure that the Torah learning that's happening in Europe is also going to happen here, and that the Jewish people are going to continue in America just as strong, that America is no different, right? That was his slogan when he came here, meaning that we have to keep Torah mitzvahs here, and we can keep Torah mitzvahs here, right? Torah is above all time and all space. It's not like it was only for Europe or only for Israel, something like that, right? So this is also very beautiful and also a little stronger, right? Because it's a responsibility. So, okay, any comments, questions? Are you ready to go on to the governing body? Or he has a specific concern that he brings up, let us say.
I think it's sad because these people came from such horrible environments in terms of pogroms and the Nazis and communist Russia, just all of this stuff. And they had lived with the tradition so long, I don't think they understood. They were trying to become American and survive. And I don't think they realized that the threat of Hitbolalut, I don't think and I think a lot of us were lost from good, pious people. They just didn't realize how hard this task was going to be. So here in the 40s, he did. I wish that had been more deeply understood by so many more people, and because the impact is for generations now until we all come back. It's just really sad, in my opinion, and I have compassion for where they were coming from, that they just didn't know, because they for generations under the worst circumstances, they were able to carry it and keep it. So they didn't realize that under better circumstances, the Hitler was gonna.
Yeah. I mean, and some of these people had been in America already, and they had already started that process. But yeah, most people didn't know, or they felt like America was different. They were under the mistaken impression that America was different. There was like every type, like they thought that it wasn't necessary anymore, or they were scared to keep it because they were scared they were going to have the same kind of persecution, there were so many misunderstandings, which is why I think the Rebbe spoke out about it so openly, like, this is what's important, this is what has to happen. And it saved a lot of, look, touching a city, look at Chicago today. There's also a result of this visit, the Chabad community in Chicago today. So it accomplished a huge thing. And yeah, it's quite complex. It's really one of the themes in the last mimer that we have gotten from the Rebbe so far, Alta Tetzav, is about this idea that, in times of Galus, where people are oppressed and Jews are oppressed, that sometimes brings out the connection to God in a more visible way than when things are easy, because when things are easy, sometimes people attribute it to other things, or they forget about God. It's like that whole idea, there's no atheists in foxholes, right? Like, sometimes that's what brings a person. So in that mimer, the Rebbe talks about the importance of feeling the pressure of Galus without it needing to be a difficult situation, telling God, like, we're gonna
Yeah.
We're going to press ourselves to get to our essence without all the bad stuff happening. We just want the good stuff happening, and we'll get there. We'll get there in that way instead. Like, let's show him that we can do it in a way. But let's bring out the yechida in a way that doesn't require difficulties. And really, that's, I mean, certainly one thing that the Rebbe devoted his entire life to was touching the essence of the Jew and bringing it out from compassion, love, and in a happy way, versus from fear of Stalin and, like, no communist is going to tell me I can't serve my God, and you know what I mean, like, and risking lives and that kind of a thing. So look at how it's flowered around the world, right? In times where it's permitted in such a beautiful way. That's really what they've devoted his whole leadership to accomplish. So, but at this moment in time, with the previous Rebbe coming to Chicago, and he went to other cities too, it was necessary to remind everybody, like, these children are the future of our people. They need to be educated properly, because if not, how will they know what to do? How will they know how to raise their children? How will they know how to make the next generation? So somebody had to, like, say that out loud, and he did, and it accomplished a lot.
Yeah.
It was the beginning of, transformation of America, I think, in a way.
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated by how in one generation all the Yiddishkeit got thrown out the window. In my grandparents' generation, I think part of it is that most of these people that came over were not educated Jews. They just weren't. And I think that's part of it, so that they didn't have the grounding that we have through Hasidus. And I remember one story in my research that I read is that a newly arrived immigrant was sitting in her aunt's kitchen, and her aunt walked by and took off this person's shaitel or tichel and said, "In this country, you don't have to wear this. You don't wear this." Like that was the new law. And I think it's because nobody was grounded. These people were not grounded. Because the Frierdiker Rebbe is talking to observant Jews, but then there's a whole wash of people who are observant but not educated. That's my take on this. It's really clearing up a lot of my confusion about how it could possibly happen in one generation. And then my parents' generation, it was all about making money, about being safe, financially is what it was, more than anything else. And then the hippie generation. I'm going through the history of the Jews in Chicago, but it's very what's the word? It's really helped me understand what happened, what really happened.
Yeah, there's I think all of those examples are all true for some groups of Jews, right?
Yeah.
Definitely people who did things without really knowing how to do them, or when they did or didn't apply. They just sort of like did them because they saw them in their parents' house, and in a shtetl where that's just how it went, and people were happy to do it. It wasn't like they were resenting, but they didn't have the underpinnings of knowing, like, yes, no matter where you are, you still have to, Shabbos always applies, or and they could be convinced out of something,
or the
without
impact.
meaning without trying to,
Yes. They didn't understand the impact.
And then there was the Enlightenment movement. Remember, let's not forget about the Enlightenment movement, which started in Europe, and it was telling everybody, like, hello, become modern. So that those group of Jews came to America before the Frum Jews did, and they were already very Americanized by the time the Frum Jews came over, and they helped that process.
Yeah.
Right? There was different groups that came at different times.
Right. The Enlightened were very politicized also. And socialism. I remember my grandfather got shot. He was a socialist, and he was shot.
Right.
He made it. He lived. He made it through. But I mean, it was what used to be the arguments in Yiddishkeit became the arguments in politics. in my grandfather's generation, and he became a staunch socialist. And my uncle, his brother, got buried in a socialist cemetery out on the south side. That's what happened to these people. I think people of that generation and the shtetl did not realize the impact of the mitzvahs. I think that's the problem. They did them without knowing what the impact was. Whereas in the Hasidus, every mitzvah that we do has a repercussion and spiritually. And I think that was not taught. People, the boys were apprenticed, and their learning stopped for most of them.
Life was
Yeah.
hard too for immigrants. Very, very hard just to survive, just to buy food and rent, and their lives were, I mean, hard in the shtetl and hard here when they first got here. I'm speaking from my own family's experience. What I think is shocking is how fast it happened, how fast, just the disconnection. And now
One generation.
my grandfather and me, it's tragic to me. And then my lack of educating my kids to this degree. I mean, I did my best with what I knew were options. Like, what happens is you get misinformation along the way. Like, this person's half Jewish. No, that person's not Jewish. All of these misconceptions that we don't know are misconceptions because we didn't get the firm education. What makes me really sad is that it's happening in Israel now. Why they're not learning from what happened here, which is so blatant. They're gung-ho, like doing the same thing. I mean, the most of the population. Less so in the Sephardi world, and less, obviously, we have Hasidim there, but there's a huge part of the population, certainly the Ashkenazi population, that is doing the copy of what happened here. I don't understand it.
Oh, it's the cry of the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe, right? Like, everybody has to do their part, whoever we come into contact with, just to share with them that exactly what we read on Simchas Torah, Torah Tzivah Lanu Moshe Kehilas Yaakov. It's the Torah is the inheritance of every Jew. So it's your inheritance. And if you suddenly got a call from a lawyer saying that some aunt that you didn't know even existed, left you an inheritance, come call my office, and do you want to find out what it is? You would go to find out what it was. I mean, a person would go to find out what it was, right? Like, what is this inheritance? You don't know. Maybe it's $10. Maybe it's $500,000. Who knows? Right? Like, the Torah is every Jew's inheritance. If you don't know what it is, maybe you want to find out what it, a person will want to find out, what is it? It's an inheritance. So it's like a precious thing that you inherited. Maybe you want to find out about it before you don't go to the office and don't even bother picking it up and bringing your identification and getting it, or whatever. It's called an inheritance. What?
A great example.
I mean, it's not my example, it's a pasuk in Torah, right? It's the inheritance of the congregation of Yaakov. Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe Kehilas Yaakov. The Torah that Moshe commanded us is the inheritance of the congregation of Yaakov. The Torah is called our inheritance. Every single Jew is a family member who inherits the Torah just by virtue of being Jewish. So we tell people, look, this is yours as much as it is mine. This is your inheritance. Don't you want to find out what it is? If you've got a physical inheritance, you'd want to find out what it was. This is spiritual and physical and everything, it's the whole everything inheritance. So maybe it's worth finding out what it is before deciding any next steps, In the next sikha, I was going to be talking about the difference between physical wealth and spiritual wealth, but it's an inheritance is one of the descriptions of the Torah. It's also called a gift. I mean, there's a lot of different terms, but that pasuk of Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe is one of the most famous pasukim in Torah, right? Is that it's called our inheritance. So, okay, so ready to go on to the third group of the Talmud Torah. So the previous has addressed the students, he's addressed the teachers, and now he's addressing the governing body. Can be a little bit stronger with them. Okay, so address to the governing body of the Talmud Torah and the Anshe Lubavitch Synagogue. When the board of the Anshe Lubavitch congregation presented their contribution to the campaign, a financial contribution, The president, Mr. B, and his fellow board members asked the Rebbe if he was pleased with their relatively fine participation. I guess I felt that they made a large contribution. So this is the Rebbe's response. I would prefer to be pleased by your spiritual state rather than by your material state. Just gets right to the point. Like if you're asking me my opinion, I'm going to tell you my opinion. So be careful what you ask for. The money for yeshivos, one should have. Spirituality, one must have. That pretty much sums up everything. There's a big difference between should and must. Materiality, one should have. Spirituality, one must have. So he doesn't even say whether he's pleased or not, but he's like, I'd rather be pleased with your service of Hashem than with your contribution. I'm trying to remember a story that, I don't know if I remember all the details, but there's a story that there's this, okay, I'm not sure I'm going to remember. I have to think for a minute. Okay, let's see, but it brings home this point. I've heard that in your Talmud Torah, school children learn from an abridged Chumash. Let me ask you, were you taught that way? How do Jews take the liberty of holding in their hands a Chumash which free thinkers have autopsied and mutilated? And out of that Chumash, they teach your children. It's pretty specific.
What's the term free thinkers?
Apikaros,
What is
meaning a person who basically denies God. And free thinkers is not really, if you look at the footnote, it says the original apikorsim. Free thinkers is really not a good translation of apikorsim, honestly. Apikorsim means people who deny God. They're not, I don't know, free thinkers, certainly in English, in America, and English sounds like a nice thing, right? Freedom is a good thing in America. So free thinkers mean people who are, creative and inventive and everything else, but that's not how it's being used. The word originally in the original was apikarsim, which means deniers of God. So how do Jews take the liberty of holding? Here's a chumash which deniers of God have autopsied and mutilated. In case it wasn't clear enough what his opinion was about this. Don't imagine that these, I'm going to say just apikarsim, these deniers of God have shortened only the chumash. Right? They took the chumash and they shortened it. Don't imagine that they only shortened the chumash. By doing so, they also shorten the Jewish years of little children whom they effectively hand over to the missionaries. I mean, unfortunately, this became very true, right? Unfortunately, like Malka was saying, when Yidden don't have a firm education, they're prey to other people who say that they do have a true education or true teaching or true whatever it is, and they try to inculcate a different teaching, right? It's easier to be inculcated with a different teaching if a person doesn't have a firm grasp of what is their inheritance, right? It's much easier. I'm not saying it's impossible even if a person does have a Torah education. It's not impossible, but it's certainly more difficult. Because they're like, no, that's not true. That's not what it says. You're misquoting. Like if they know information, they say like, don't talk to me. I'm not interested. They don't know information. It can be very alluring, especially because there's so many mind games and misquotes and, and if they don't know it, then they were like, yeah, that's yeah. And the missionaries became very strong at a certain point in time. Unfortunately, a lot of Jewish people who were looking for spirituality fell prey to that. Those cults, really. Every Jew should realize that the Talmud Torah schools that use the abridged Chumash and other impure apikorsis textbooks, right? Deniers of that textbooks, the schools whose principals and teachers desecrate Shabbos and eat treat food, such schools are nests of apostasy. The parents of those pupils will lie down after their 120 years, leaving no one to say Kaddish or Yizkar. And unfortunately, I think that's also true. I mean, we've seen it. I know we see it in Shul, right? You know, whether there's no one to say Kaddish or Yizkar because the family doesn't care to, or whether because there's no one to say Kaddish or Yizkar because they've intermarried and there's no Jews left in the family, or they don't know about it. If they knew about it, maybe they would do it, but they don't know about it. I mean, there's so many reasons, but unfortunately, there are people, if no one to say Kaddish or Yizkar, and Baruch Hashem, there are institutions like Kol Chabad and so on that will say Kaddish and Yizkar for people. I think this is just an example. I think it's trying to give an example of something there, because I think at that time, I'm guessing, I don't know, I cannot get into a Rebbe's mind, but I'm guessing that the people who he's speaking to, saying Kaddish and Yizkar is like a given for sure, no matter what, right? So he's trying to give an example of something that is so absolutely Jewish that everybody does it, no matter what else they are or aren't doing. And he's saying even that's going to be negotiable if the basics aren't taken care of now in another generation or so. That's not going to be a given anymore. You know, something that's such a given is not necessarily going to be a given anymore. I do think, Baruch Hashem, that, you know, the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe effectuated a turn in that. I'm saying it was going in that direction, and then it like switched back, like Ty was saying, you know, but like now there's a return, which is actually predicted in the prophets, the Heshev Levavos Abanim, that the fathers' hearts are going to be returned to God through their children. In other words, the next generation, you know, there's the generations that are lost, but then those generations are going to become reconnected to Torah mitzvahs, and they're going to affect the older generations. So, but at this moment, he's speaking to them and he's telling them, look, this is where it's headed. So just like, be careful, you can't do this, right? The board members now explain themselves. The curriculum, they said, was drawn up by the education committee, which held that it was better for the children in their first year to use the abridged Chumash. Like they're trying to explain why they did what they did, and this whole education committee, and it's what they decided, and, you know. So now the Rebbe replies to them. An education committee that includes the abridged Chumash and other impure, God-denying textbooks is expelling children from the Jewish faith. It must be moved out of the way without any compromise. This education committee must be moved out of the way without any compromise. Such irresponsible people should not and cannot be entrusted with Jewish education. Such an education committee is treif. It kind of leaves no room for misunderstanding. As Gabayim and heads of the Talmud Torah schools, you must do tshuva. Unknowingly, you have brought misfortune upon Jewish souls and defiled them with heresy. Purify your hitherto treif Talmud Torah school. Clean out and throw away the apikorsus grime, the God-denying grime. Shake off the irresponsible education committee and entrust the Talmud Torah to the hands of reliable, God-fearing educators. And God will forgive your serious, unknowing transgression, and you will be happily provided with fine students. May you all be blessed. So, yeah, that's
Right.
right.
I just listened to this shiur by this man named Rabbi Aaron Levy. He's Israeli, and he does some lessons for Chozer B'Tshuva and stuff like that. It's really a good thing, program. He's Haredi, so yeshivish. But anyway, what he was saying was that, just what he's saying right here, just that people need to know, you can't like bland out the truth and make it nice and just edit it a little bit, because what happens is then people don't know what they're doing. These kids learning from an abridged Chumash, they're not going to know that was what they learned from until later. That's what I was saying about people assimilating, is that if you don't make it super, very, very clear to American kids that when you intermarry, if the mother is not Jewish, your kids are not Jewish. They're not half Jewish if a father's Jewish, et cetera, whatever it is. If you light candles, and I'm having to relearn everything now. You can't light candles when you get home. you have to light them before Shabbos starts. Like you bring in Shabbos. It's not like I get home from work at 7. That's when I'll light. Like you don't know though. It's happened to me. I'm not criticizing other people. I'm having to get out of this very slowly, and it's very hard because you don't know what you don't know. And that's what, so this rabbi was talking about. You have to be very clear about what is happening, and this is what he's doing.
Right. And I think the mashal that I like to give to people, I don't know if it's a perfect mashal, but if you have your grandmother's chicken soup recipe in your family and everybody loves the chicken soup, or your great grandmother, and it's been handed down throughout the generations, and then you decide that you don't want to put chicken in, or not you, a person, person doesn't want to put chicken in anymore, it's going to put all the other vegetables in, but not the chicken, because they want it to be without chicken for some reason. And then they decide to add this ingredient because now the chicken's not there, so it doesn't taste as good, so they're going to add something else. Before you know it, so they can't call it their grandmother's soup anymore, because it's not their grandmother's soup. They took this out, they added this in, they put this, right? They can say it's based on my grandmother's recipe, but like we changed a lot of things, and at a certain point you can't even call it your grandmother's soup anymore.
The problem is that the kids don't know. That's
right. So that's why it has to be very. That's why Torah has to be taught, as the previous Rebbe was saying. Torah has to be taught by somebody who believes that Torah was given by God, and this is Torah's Maisha from Har Sinai, and it's better to say the whole thing without and say, okay, a person maybe is not ready to do everything, not right. Everybody still, like the previous said to that group of businessmen who came to him, like, I do whatever I can. Now, I don't know what possibly the previous wasn't doing, but the way he described himself is, I do whatever I can. That's how he described himself, right? You do whatever you can. Okay, whatever they could is probably very different than whatever the previous Rebbe could. But if a person just has the attitude of they're going to do whatever they can, that capacity keeps growing as they learn more, because they're doing whatever they can, and then maybe in the next month they can do a little more, so they're doing whatever they can, and then they're doing whatever they can again, right? And it's like, it's like exercising. If a person is 100 pounds overweight, never exercise a day in their life, what they can might literally be to walk up and down their block, and then like after doing that for a month, what they can might be to walk around the block, and then after cutting down some of what they're eating and going around the block, after 5 years, they might have lost the weight they needed to lose, and they can run a marathon. I don't know, like who knows what people's potentials are, right? But we don't want to water down the truth because people aren't ready to do everything. We don't change Torah because people are not ready to do what Torah says. We say, this is what Torah says, and do whatever you can. But understand what Torah says, and understand that you're doing whatever you can of Torah. But that doesn't mean that Torah is now different because of what we can and can't do. Torah is from Hashem, and whatever it says, that's what it says. It hasn't changed. And then whatever we can do of it, we can do. So you can do whatever you want with the soup, but then it becomes your soup. Don't call it your grandmother's soup. If she was there looking at that soup, it's not the same soup anymore. It's not the same soup. That's okay. But just say, this is my soup. And maybe it's based on some kind of loose recipe of my grandmother, but it's my soup. It's not really if she was here right now, she would not recognize this soup, so it's not my grandmother's soup anymore. That's, just full disclosure, or whatever they say, right? So in the beginning, I think people understood that, or the people, but then like they said, these people didn't say to the previous job, but this is not an abridged chumash, this is everything. They knew it was an abridged chumash. That's why he was talking to them strongly. What his point was, the next generation won't even know that it's an abridged chumash, like you're saying. They're going to think this is the chumash, but it's not the chumash. So that's the problem. That's what he's seeing is happening, and what he's trying to stop from happening is that they don't call this the chumash when it's not the chumash. It's not the Chumash. It's somebody's decision of what these children should be learning and call the Chumash, but you're miseducating them. So that's a dangerous thing. So that I think that's what he's trying to stop that from happening. And again, really, I think there was a tremendous success. I mean, look at the world around. I mean, there was tremendous assimilation, and there's tremendous coming back now, Baruch Hashem, and hopefully it's just continue and bring Mashiach. That is part of the prophecy of the coming of Mashiach, is the idea that the children will bring back the parents. So there is that generation that maybe got that miseducation, but then somebody's like, hey, this doesn't sound right, and get back to the education, and then share with the older generation like this and the younger generation. But I'm saying look, there's always been issues in the Jewish people. It's not like for 3,000 years everybody and all the lines were 100%. There's been different kinds of things going on, right? Even in Spain, there were people who were secretly Jewish who didn't really convert. There were people who really converted also. I'm saying it's not, there's been lines that have had to be brought back. The education today is much more available than it ever has been. Like going back to what Malka said, it's much more available. With the printing press, it became more available. With machinery that could do a lot of manual labor, so people had more time, it became more available. With translation of texts, it became more available. With the internet, it became more available, right? There's so many layers that there's a prediction also in the Zohar, right? That it talks about before Mashiach comes, the gates of wisdom are going to be opened up. So, all that's happening, and it's becoming more available and more, there are people, there's a person who we know who was at our table, I remember, Yantif Shabbos, who wants to become a ger. I mean, he's living in, a little tiny town someplace. Most of his education, I mean, now he's connected to the Chabad house, and now he's, thinking of moving into this area because he needs to be in a Jewish community. But most of his learning has been done on the internet. And he's learned a lot. He knows a lot. But there's so much that's available, so much authentic Torah that's available. And if a person is really has access to the internet, they have access to there's a lot of unauthentic things on the internet as well. But there's a lot of authentic Torah, and there's classes on Zoom, right? Like we have a class on Zoom right now. Like people don't have to be in Chicago in order to be on classes. They don't have to be. You can go, Torah Cafe has classes. Person can listen to or look at any time of the day or night. So there's a lot that's available, and hopefully it's reaching the people, all of us. We all need to learn and to be inspired and to make good choices and to connect. And so that's a whole new revolution. The cyberspace access has created a whole nother way for people to learn. So information is the internet used to be called the information highway, right? So not everything's on the internet, but there's certainly a lot of schmutz and a lot of stuff that we don't want people to have access to, and is playing with kids' minds and so on. That's also true. And what we want to focus on is how to make sure that Torah authentic learning, right? Whether it's children in years, I would say, or children in knowledge, doesn't matter. The way to continue the Jewish people, right? What continues the Jewish nation forward, every generation after generation, is Torah learning. Because Torah learning leads to doing mitzvahs, and the learning and the doing in the service of Hashem. That's what keeps the Jewish people. That's the secret of our ability to have survived all these years in exile, right? What other nation, when they're exiled from their land, their whole identity is based on their land. When they're exiled from their land, they're not a nation anymore. But where our identity is not based on our land, that's a whole really message of Simchas Torah, which is the message of Shavuos, right? Simchas Torah being connected to Shavuos, that the giving of the Torah is on Shavuos, the celebration of the Torah is in Simchas Torah. Shavuos was given in the desert before we got to Eretz Yisrael, to teach us that our main connection to God is through the Torah. Yes, Eretz Yisrael was also given to us by Hashem, But even when we're not in Eretz Yisrael, we still have the Torah, and we're still learning the Torah. We're still connected to Hashem. So when we're exiled from Eretz Yisrael, we're still the Jewish nation. We still have Torah. We are still connected to Hashem, and that's how we go through the generations until after the first, first Bais HaMikdash was destroyed. We got back to, so we built the Bais HaMikdash. That and after the second Bais HaMikdash was destroyed, we're still a Jewish nation. I mean, what other nation is around 2,000 years after they've been exiled from their land? Even you want to say that 48, and we got back to the state of Israel and so on, was some level of reconnecting to the land. But I mean, in 2,000 years, I mean, the 70 years in the span of 2,000 years is nothing. I'm saying, and as you said before, what's going on in Eretz Yisrael is not necessarily Torah Yiddishkeit in the fullest, way that it could be. So remember that the Torah, exactly the previous Rebbe was saying here, the Torah is the Torah education for youth, for adults, for everybody, and then the application of that education into practical keeping of the mitzvahs is what sustains the Jewish nation generation after generation after generation. And it's going back to the beginning, it's the inheritance of every person. So might as well find out what our own inheritance is before we decide that there's nothing there or something else is better or something like that. So anyway, that's kind of the yeah. So it's short, but it was, I guess it got a lot of conversation going.
Strong. Good.
But I don't know. So I don't know if anybody has anything else they want to say. We're really, class is pretty much over.
That was very powerful. It was very powerful. Do you know what happened? Did they actually get their act together? Tell me.
I don't know. I don't know. But it's so interesting to see the different message to the different groups.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So that's anyway, interesting, right? Anyway, have a good day.